في حديثه للشرق قال بيير-أوليفييه غورينشاس المستشار الاقتصادي ومدير إدارة البحوث في صندوق النقد الدولي أن توقعات الصندوق تستبعد حدوث أزمة اقتصادية عالمية، بل تميل أكثر لتوقع تباطؤ في النمو بسبب السياسات المتشددة للمصارف المركزية في العالم. غورينشاس أضاف أن أبرز ما يقلق صندوق النقد اليوم هو أن يكون القضاء على التضخم أصعب مما هو متوقع.
I want to be very clear that under our baseline projections, we are not seeing a crisis. We're seeing a slowdown. Part of this slowdown is in fact due to the fact that central banks are actively tightening monetary policy to bring down inflation. And that's an absolutely central task for most of the central banks around the world to get price or inflation under control. So that's one part of it. Then, in terms of our projections, we're still concerned about the way things could turn out worse than what we have in our baseline scenario. And so at the risk of sounding maybe a little bit even more pessimistic than what you just said, we flag out in our report a number of risks that could materialize. And just to give a little bit of a preview in terms of what are the drivers behind the slowdown? Well, inflation, very important. Second, the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that has generated a lot of instability in the energy markets, and that's still continuing in this year and into next year. And third, we have a very significant slowdown in China that is related to the zero COVID policy in that country, and also some weakness in the property sector. So putting all of this together, you see sort of three poles of weakness: inflation and central banks tightening, European countries very affected by the energy crisis related to gas supplies coming from Russia, and then China. Now, even if that's our baseline scenario, there are a number of risks to that baseline. And those risks are important and we need to think about them. We haven't had, so far, dislocation in financial markets. But we are concerned that the monetary policy tightening and say the strength of the dollar, for instance, that is coming with it in many emerging market economies could create a lot of financial frictions. So we're concerned about that. We're concerned that inflation may prove harder to eradicate than we anticipate right now, because let's face it, up until now, we have been surprised on the upside by inflation repeatedly. Every one of our forecasts in the last year, we've been coming out and we project higher inflation and more persistent inflation. Now, we could be surprised yet again. And, if you think about China, that's also an area where we could have the property sector that weakens further. And finally, the war could escalate. Energy markets could get more volatile with increases in energy prices going forward. So all of these things put together, this 2.7%, there are a lot of things that could happen that could push us into worse territory. So this is also to provide a little bit of an overview of the range of outcomes that could happen.
اشتركوا في قناة اقتصاد الشرق مع بلومبرج على يوتيوب لمتابعة برنامج الصباح مع صبا. معي أنا صبا عودي.